Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Kansas loses again in somewhat dramatic fashion. Is this Groundhog Day, Kevin? What the fuck is going on?
We're going right in.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't even. I'll try to reel it in. I'm sorry. This is the Paid Podcast, a live edition after just minutes after another crushing loss for Kansas football. 24-20, KU loses at Arizona. I'm Nick Springer, and I'm here with Kevin Flaherty. Wesley Williams says, I'm tired of this, Grandpa. Well, that's too bad. You keep digging. I don't know where, for more losses, I guess. I don't know. Kansas loses. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in Possible. Member FDIC. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. If you are here live, you should be doing three things. You should be subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and sharing a comment. And I'm sure many of you have many comments, as do myself and Kevin. Yeah, unbelievable. Like I said, is this Groundhog Day? I mean, just again and again, it's the same crap over and over again. Kansas finds a way to lose. You're up 20-17. You have a 4th and 2 with 2:43 left in the fourth quarter. You don't even go for it. You kick the field goal, and Laith Marjan, I think they mentioned it on the broadcast. It sounded like he maybe tweaked something on his previous 50-yard kick or something was off. I don't know. And then he ends up missing the field goal at 20-17 when they don't go for it. So Arizona goes down and scores. And I will say, Arizona, if it was 24-23, if he made the field goal, you still lose the game. So just a disastrous performance from Kansas. And once again, this game, more than any other game, I think before, the players played more than good enough to win this game. And yet here we are sitting with another loss, and Kansas is 5-5, and a bowl game is not looking great.
Yeah, I always thought the Iowa State game was the more winnable of these two. But having said that, this was in hand, Nick. And when you're right there, you have 2 yards to go, basically for bowl eligibility. Because if you get that, you can pretty much run the clock out. Yeah, you technically they would have a little bit of a chance, but not really a chance to go back down the field. And so there are some situations where I think sometimes where maybe there's, an angel on your shoulder or a devil on your shoulder. No, this one should have been full on devil on your shoulder saying, go get the bleeping 2 yards and win this football game. And I think even beyond the fact that it's just the right decision, Nick, it sends a message to your players. Like, what kind of message does it send to your players when you don't let them go win the football game? And I know that some people will say, well, it shows confidence in the defense that they can get No, have your players go out there and say, look, you get these 2 yards, you win this football game. I know you're going to go get these 2 yards. Now go get them. And so not only did I feel like it was a bad decision, I also felt like it's the sort of thing that kind of permeates, right? That you aren't saying to your team, hey, we're not coaching scared on this one. Ball's the wall. We're going to win this game. And that's what it was.
Yeah, unbelievable stuff, really, down the stretch. And the defense played great. That defense did really, really well. Maybe we should start with some of the positives, I guess, with what the defense did.
I'm an optimistic guy, but don't start with the positives. Like,
all right, no positives
right away.
I'm not
saying we can't talk positives at all, because I did think DK called a really good game, and there were some positives there. But no, Nick, like, I think this is one that you look like you're almost sane washing it if you go in with the optimism stuff. When you had this game right there, it was right there in your hands, a lot like potentially a pick six in this game, and you just don't touch it.
Yeah, all right. We'll table the positives for later in the show. I tweeted this out before we went on the show here. this feels different from, this doesn't feel like just another close loss. This one hurts even more. This one's even more devastating. It's just absolutely brutal. I mean, there's really no excuse for it. Like I said, the players played more than good enough to win the football game, and as you said, when you don't even give your guys a chance to go out and try to win the game, it's incredibly frustrating. And Totten Hawk, I think, makes a great point. Like, losers make excuses. And I'll be curious to see what Lance has to say after this game about some of his thoughts. The other thing that really aggravated me about it is all he's doing is just whining about the holding call against Jalen Todd at halftime. And I'm like, bro, you're a football coach. Penalties are going to happen. Bad calls are going to happen. You have to show some self-control. I mean,
and when you have a lead, what message does it say to your team when you're out there telling people that's a game-changing call, right? Yeah. You're not exactly sending the message like, okay, let's get it. And if you watch a lot of the great coaches, Nick Saban burned the ass of some officials, right? Like, he would get after them. But it wasn't an extended thing over 5 minutes, 10 minutes, not going into the locker room. It was, I think you're wrong. I'll probably F-bomb you a little bit and then right back to the next play. At some point, you start to feel like, man, like, coach doesn't think we're going to get this done. And I'm not saying that's like happening. I'm just saying it would be hard not to feel that way when your coach is just repeatedly, oh, there's this excuse. Oh, the refs are against us, whatever else. No, line up and go play football.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure many people probably here are Chiefs fans or pay attention to the Chiefs, right? There's been a long history of teams that do that come in, already wanting to blame the refs because of that narrative. And I mean, I think back to the Texans. There was when the Texans played the Chiefs in the playoffs a couple years ago, and they were already talking like 3 days before the game about how, it's going to be us versus the refs. And it's like, when you have that mentality, it seeps into everything you do, and it negatively impacts. And I think with Lance Leipold, I've seen it happen time and time again, where he just lets it control him, right? And I think Totten Hawk again makes a great point. Worry about your team, not the officials. Yeah, I mean, you've got to let that go, right? Like, you've got to be able to move on. And you're absolutely right, Kevin. In that situation, Kansas had the lead still, Kansas had the lead still. So quit bitching and get back to work. I mean. It was just absolutely a brutal game. Kansas gets the ball. I was actually going to pull up the drive chart here. Kansas had how many possessions when it was 20-17 when they couldn't put it away? I was trying to see. So they go up 20-17 with 11 and a half minutes left in the fourth quarter. And they end up with 3 possessions with the lead, up 20-17 in the fourth quarter. And they can't muster a single point. They can't, unable to put the game away. And that's kind of been sort of the gotcha of this team, is that they've never been able to make that next play, right? It's been so close so many times, I mean, I'll just go back to the Texas Tech game real quick. That game's 21-17. Texas Tech is reeling with a backup quarterback, and you get the ball to start the second half, and you do nothing, and then the game's over. In this game, you get several chances, and even the defense, you mentioned the drop pick six.
State was like that too.
Yeah. I mean, there's been several games this season where Kansas makes every play except the next one, and then that ends up costing them. So, yeah, it's a sad state of affairs, to say the least.
Yeah, and I think when you look at how well the defense played in this one in particular, and Nick, both you and I picked Arizona to win this football game. And part of the reason we did, I think, is Arizona has an elite secondary. It's one of the best secondaries in the country. And on the other side, we didn't trust Kansas's defense to hold up against Arizona's offense. And so for Kansas to be in that spot, and, that whole thing, I do believe, let the praise be as loud as the disrespect. DK McDonald called a terrific game. They were aggressive. They got after it. They should have forced more turnovers. They didn't. But at the same time, I think that when you're in that situation and you're two yards away. And the other part, Nick, is Arizona called timeout. So even though Jalen left because he was a little shaken up or whatever, they gave you a chance to put him back in. And so I really do think that the yardage, the first down was worth so much more than what that 3 would have meant, even if Laith Marjan had connected. Because Arizona would have still gotten the ball back, would have still had plenty of time to go score a touchdown, even if he had connected on it. And the fact that you kicked the field goal in that situation, it wasn't the risk-reward decision that should have been there. We know Lance Leipold is conservative. We know he usually makes the conservative decision. Sometimes there's an explanation for it where you can say, well, I can kind of see on what. No, there wasn't on that one, I don't think.
D. Jones asked, why is he so afraid to go out and try to win a game outright? His in-game decisions are strange. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this in the past, and you just mentioned it there, Kevin. Like Lance Leipold, part of what makes him is that he is a very process-driven coach, right? He sticks with what his process is. He doesn't tend to deviate very often from what his core process is that he's developed over the course of however many years that he's been coaching, and he follows it to a fault. And it's that simple, And Jim Zebrowski has made a couple comments in press conferences that I don't know if you've picked up on it, Kevin, but there's been several times where Zebrowski has outright stated like it's Lance's decision. Like it is Lance's decision. He is the one. And so that if you want to look at it in from the jaded perspective, it makes you think, okay, well, maybe there are others below him that want to make a different decision, and it's Lance's decision the other way. And so that's kind of what leads me down this path of, man, I mean, part of what has made Lance Leipold what he is that, he's able to have his teams band together. He's able to, keep his culture going. You have to feel like there's got to be some cracks in the foundation of that process after a game like this.
Yeah, I think so. I think there should be some evaluation that happens. And Kyle makes a point. You can't expect players to learn from mistakes when he doesn't adjust either. And you're heading into a bye week, and you should be looking at your process, and you should be at the same time you're looking at, okay, what are we doing well? What do we need to work on? Work on fundamentals, whatever. As a coach, you should be looking at your process too. And what's going on there. I know there's a lot of Jalen's stuff in there. I thought Jalen played pretty well. He had a few drops today. Obviously, the fumble was almost devastating, where he, you hate to say he didn't super wrap the ball up, but also, I mean, the guy got right on it, but it didn't wind up hurting him. Overall, I think the pass to Keaton Kubeka over the middle, it sounds like we didn't get a replay on it, obviously, on the broadcast, but it sounds like Kubeka, if he had sat down, that was what Jalen was expecting him to do, which is why that looked the way that it did. And if you have, I think if you looked at the other quarterbacks with what Kansas is currently doing on offense, I think it would look a lot worse than what Kansas is currently doing. Also, I mean, let's put it out there. He did have some terrific throws in this one. The long touchdown pass that he laid up there for Emmanuel Henderson, the slant / post that he threw for Emmanuel Henderson, where he gets tripped up by a shoelace and is almost a touchdown. He put right on him. Yeah, terrible replays. There were about 4 or 5 plays, I want to say, over the course of the game that I wanted to see back, and they just didn't show. So I'm not sure what happened there, but there were a few of those where I wish that I had like an all 22 to watch this week to see what happened, because there were a few times in there where I was like, well, I think this happened, but we didn't ultimately get a chance to go back and watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jalen's biggest issue is that he's just pressing big time. I think it's very obvious that he is feeling external pressure. You can see it on his face. When they do cut to him during the broadcast, there were several times where you could visibly see how frustrated he was, whether it's frustrated with himself, frustrated with, what's happening, whatever it may be. I think it's very obvious that he is being negatively impacted by pressure, right, from the outside. And I think it goes back to the K-State game, right? I mean, that was the biggest one where I think you could notice it, but I think you could see it today as well.
He led KU in rushing today. I mean, and that's a tough way. That's a tough way to win when your quarterback is your leading rusher and you're counting on him to make this sort of throws against this Arizona secondary that would have been tough. And you're having guys who have drops. You know, I know there was one third down conversion that should have been because you had a drop. The Keaton Kubeka thing, like I said, I think he was expecting Keaton to just sort of sit down and that would have been a completion. And so you look at the numbers at the end of it and you're like, man, you know, the accuracy maybe wasn't that great, but ultimately there were some different things that were working there. Man, it would have been nice with how well the defense played, with how aggressively DK McDonald called this game. It would have been nice for them to capitalize on those potential turnovers, Nick.
Yeah, that was brutal. You know, you had the one, and also, or actually, setting aside the 3 interceptions that KU almost had, there was also a blitz by Jalen Todd on a third down that could have easily been a sack fumble if you remember back in. I think it was actually in the first quarter where the ball ends up flying out of bounds, but could have easily been another sack fumble for Jalen Todd. Jalen Todd had, you know, outside of the holding penalty that was called against him, he had a phenomenal game. And so that was frustrating. You know, you had the Leroy Harris play, you had the Taylor Davis interception that wasn't, and then the Saeed Gibbs one was the worst of them all. I mean, that would have been a game-sealing interception a la Rich Miller against K-State a couple of years ago. It's similar vibes on that one. I mean, it hit him square between his numbers on the jersey. Fafita threw it right to him. And so, very frustrating. And like I said, I think the worst part of that is you want the defense to be rewarded for how well they played. And instead, you have, you know, a holding penalty that negates a pick six,
and he didn't have to hold, Nick. Like that, don't get me wrong, like Jalen Todd played a really good game and obviously had 2 sacks and had the pass breakup of a potential touchdown, but he didn't need to hold there. He was in good position, and not only did he hold, Nick, he continued to hold. And that was the thing. If you have like that initial grab, you might get away with it, but the extended thing, you're going to get flagged every time for that. People are saying that's a soft call. I don't necessarily disagree, but at the same time, that's going to get called every single time when that happened.
Yeah, I'm not really here for that's a soft call discussion. Like it's a penalty, right? Like whether it's a soft call or not, it's a penalty. It can be called, and it was. So I'm not really hearing that argument, but obviously it was very frustrating. I just saw some of Lance Leipold's comments. Kevin, Lance Leipold is claiming that on the 4th and 2 play, Jalen Daniels would not have been able to go in because he was taken off the field the previous play, which again, Arizona called timeout. So
Arizona called timeout, so that shouldn't hold. If you have an injury, that's why people call timeouts in those situations is you should be able to send him back out there.
Yeah. So I don't think that's correct. I think, I think you're right on that one. I think the timeout that should have allowed him to go back in.
I also agree with Joe Loomis on that.
Exactly.
Where like put in Zeke and Highshaw and let him go. Like it's 2 yards. Like it's
2 yards with a bowl game, a trip to a bowl game on the line, right? Like, you got to go for it. All right. There was a couple questions here that I want to circle back to in the chat. Brendan Glissick asked, where do we go from here? I want to touch on that. We also have some of the Spike saying, as a student, okay, you can please give us some hope this isn't lost cause of honor. So let's dive into some of that angle of it after a quick break. We'll take a quick break, which gives us a chance to remind you that you could be on the field at the 50-yard line inside GEHA Field for the official coin toss of the Chiefs home game this season. Visit Chiefs.com/GEHA now. Enter for a chance to win and to be on the field for a once-in-a-lifetime view of the pregame coin toss. Plus, you can score other exclusive prizes. Enter for a chance to win at Chiefs.com/GEHA. GEHA is a proud partner of the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll be diving a little bit deeper into more of this game between KU and Arizona coming up next.
I'm Brett Goodwin, one of the owners of The Learning Tree. The Learning Tree is a neighborhood toy store in Prairie Village, Kansas. This has been here in this location since 2000s, and my husband Alan and I purchased the store in 2023. Alan and I grew up in families where we've always wanted to have a business together. Alan grew up, for instance, his parents had a jewelry store. I worked in a local toy store here in Prairie Village when I was growing up. When this opportunity happened in 2023, we knew right away we wanted to contact them and pursue the store. We wouldn't have been able to get the store without the team at Emprise Bank. From the day we contacted them, they knew what we needed to do, which was very helpful. I would absolutely recommend the team at Emprise Bank to anyone looking to secure a business. We worked with Emprise from day one. They were extremely helpful. They were always great resources. We talk to them frequently. They know the area. They're very friendly. We know who we're going to talk with, and they know what we need to do. We hope we'll see you at the Learning Tree.
This is the Payheed Podcast, a live edition of the show. Immediately following Kansas's devastating loss to Arizona, 24-20, KU drops to 5-5. I'm Nick Springer alongside Kevin Flaherty. If you're joining us live, you should be doing three things. You should be liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing a comment. Kevin, it seems like you have a point of order.
Yeah, I think Kyle is actually right looking back at it. I think you can't put Jalen back in looking at it. Even after the timeout, I think that is just for a helmet deal. But at the same time, I would have gone for it with Zeke or Cole or whoever. It was 2 yards to win the game.
Shit, man, give me a helmet. I would have gone out there for one play to get us to get KU to a damn bowl. Come on, bro.
And Lance, of course, said that had Jalen been there, they would have gone for it. But I don't know. Okay, let's circle back here real quick. Brendan earlier in the chat asked, where do we go from here? So let's kind of reset a little bit. So Kansas is 5-5. So where do they go from? So let's talk about where they go from here, as in the rest of the season, and then where they go from here long term. As in the rest of the season, obviously the pitchforks are out right now. People are upset. Adam says, I'd rather see Nick than lose how we did. Yeah, thank you. In terms of the rest of the season, Kansas is now 5-5. You have a bye week and then a trip to Ames to take on Iowa State. And then you're going to play Utah on Black Friday after Thanksgiving at the booth to end the season. So a couple things. Number one, I will say this. I know everybody's got the pitchforks out tonight. There is absolutely zero chance that Lance Leipold is not the head coach for the rest of the season. So I want to make that very clear. He's going to be the coach for the rest of the season, period, full stop. So don't even, I get it, but I'm just telling you, don't even entertain that as a possibility because it's not going to happen, I don't think. And if I'm wrong, okay, fine. Now, that leaves KU with two more chances to get to a bowl game against an Iowa State team that I guess Kyle's right, unless he resigns or retires, but that's not going to happen. I guess he could retire after the season. But he's going to be your coach for the next two games, which means you've got to find a way to rally after the bye week and go play against an Iowa State team that, as you talked about, Kevin, is reeling. They've dealt with a lot of injuries. You even said today against TCU, though.
They did win today against TCU. You even said that you thought that Iowa State was more winnable than Arizona State. And so you win that game, maybe you get to a bowl. The Utah game continues to look tougher and tougher. And, based on the temperature of the fan base and with that being an 11 a.m. Black Friday game the day after Thanksgiving, I'm not expecting there to be much of an environment for that game for KU, especially if they don't win against Iowa State. So, yeah, these next two games are looking pretty rough for KU. I mean, everything basically falls in the Iowa State game, I think, because if you're 5-6 with Utah rolling into town, I don't expect you to win that game. So that's where I guess you are in the short term as it pertains to the remainder of this season. Big picture wise, yes, this game I think absolutely now opens up a conversation I think you have to have about where the direction of KU is going in the future. You're in the process of building a brand new football stadium. You have a $300 million donation that you got from David Booth. Everything points to this football program setting itself up to take the next step. So the question becomes, do you believe that Lance Leipold is the right head coach for Kansas to take that next step? Because this is a critical juncture for Kansas, right? This is a very critical juncture for this football program. You're going to have to make a decision. If you were Travis Goff, let's say worst case scenario here, Kansas finishes the year 5-7. If you're Travis Goff, you have to have a serious conversation with yourself and with the rest of the athletic department about where this program is headed and if Lance is the coach to make that next step, because you're going to have a new football stadium. You have a $300 million donation, right? Like, it is imperative that you capitalize on the positive things that you have surrounding this program. And the question, I think, now seriously becomes, is Lance Leipold the right guy for it? And again, there's multiple facets to this conversation. As Tautan Hack brings up in the chat here, you're not going to find a better coach, is what he's suggesting right now for the coaching market. That is probably accurate, right? So that factors in as well. Like, are you going to find somebody that you think is better, right? Just off the top of the head, if you're looking around nationally at sort of, head coaching candidates, you're right. There really isn't anybody that's like looks like they would be a surefire, solid hire at this stage. So maybe that factors in. You also have to factor in the fact that, if you wanted to potentially go the route of trying to change head coaches, that's going to cost a lot of money, and that's maybe not necessarily something that Kansas could potentially even afford to do. So there's a lot of different aspects of the conversation of where Kansas decides to go in the long-term future, as in, the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So I don't know. Well, I guess where are you at with that, Kevin, in terms of the microcosm of just the remainder of this season versus going forward?
I think Lance Leipold is the guy for now. I do. And there are a few reasons that I'll say that. And I know some people in the chat are going to disagree. I think first, I think there are some things that they do really well right now. One of them is, I think Gildersleeve is tremendous. I think he's a really good strength coach. I think culturally, they do a good job of setting things up. They don't get rated in the transfer portal the way that a lot of other programs do, in part because of that, in part because of the way that they communicate. I think you have, probably Lance's best recruiting class coming in, which is a factor in that. And I think, Nick, when you look at the class from 2 classes ago, I think there's a lot of talent in that group too. And so I see the young talent that's coming up. And so I'm not necessarily in a situation where I want to boot and blow everything up, because I do think there are things they're doing right culturally. I think there are things that they're doing right developmentally. I think there are things that they're starting to really get right in recruiting. And so when you look at all of those things, I'm not a let's cut bait with Lance right now, on a Saturday type of deal. I do think the interesting point that some people are making, and that you pointed out, is this is a very important time for KU football. And we've talked about it on the show before, in that I believe there's going to be another round of realignment probably coming up within the next 5 to 10 years. And so what you're doing right now, whether it's the stadium stuff, whether it's, hey, putting a competitive product on the field, so much is about putting yourself in the best possible situation where you're at there. And so to me, nuking the whole thing when you have some of these young, really talented guys. Look, Leroy Harris made a nice play or two tonight. Dak Brinkley made some great plays tonight. Blake Harrell is back next year. Trey Lathan is supposed to be back next year. Taylor Davis made some nice plays tonight. He's supposed to be back next year. Jalen Todd, I know, had the hold, but other than that, played a really nice game. He's supposed to be back next year. And so when you start looking at it, Austin Alexander did some nice things today, actually. When you start looking at the picture holistically and looking at, hey, next year you're going to roll out a Zeke Marshall or David McComb. You're going to have some of the exciting skill talent that they have coming into the program. And you're adding this recruiting class where you, for the first time that I can remember in a really long time, Nick, you won the state of Kansas. And so when you look at all of those different things combined, I get that losses like this are incredibly frustrating. They're frustrating to me. And I'm sure you guys saw in the intro that it was very frustrating to me. It takes a lot for me to emote like that. I'm not typically that person, but I will say that when you're looking at, hey, You want to be in the exact perfect spot or the best possible spot heading into 2029, 2020, 2030, et cetera. I don't think finding a new head coach this offseason is the right move in terms of putting yourself on that right trajectory.
I actually think Kyle Coffey had a good comment here in the chat. Just said,
yeah,
he just has to change his in-game coaching, and then it's fine. I don't know if he will. I think that's fair because, as you outlined, Lance Leipold, and I've talked about it many times. He was in all essence the perfect coach for Kansas football at the time that they hired him in 2021. Right, a guy who can build your program, a culture guy, and as you outlined, has done all those things and has built a program that in the era of the transfer portal has maintained a lot of talent. And so that is the question, I think, for me is Lance Leipold, does Lance Leipold have enough of an ability to self-reflect and say, you know what, I have my process, the process that I've used, and it's gotten me this far, but I need to be open to, changing how I approach in-game coaching, or I need to be open to changing how I approach, some of the decision-making that I make. Right. And so that, I think, to me ends up being the ultimate question is, does he have enough self-reflection? Does he have enough of an ability to look in the mirror and say, you know what, the process that I have, it's gotten me this far, but I need to be open to being flexible with it because this was you were 2 yards away from going to a bowl game tonight. And now you're staring down the potential of possibly missing a bowl game entirely because it's let's face it, it's not going to be easy to rally your team back from a loss like that. I mean, that's a very, very difficult loss. And I know that's also part of Lance Leipold's culture, which is to, over the course of the season, take each game in stride, not get too high, not get too low in terms of, week to week. And if you lose a game, you just turn the page and try to go 1-0 the next week. But over the course of the season, how many of these types of losses can you suffer? How many times can you have games where a coach decision, you can pretty blatantly circle it and say, hey, if you would have done something else, probably the result might have been different, and no much more so than this game tonight. But I mean, you could point to virtually every loss outside of the K-State loss and say, if KU had maybe done one thing differently from a coaching standpoint or changed one outcome, in terms of what they decided to do coaching wise, they could have won the game, right? Like, that's not hyperbolic to say outside of the K-State game. And so when that happens, how much does it take for Lance Leipold to maybe have that sort of self-realization about maybe understanding that he needs to take a different approach in these types of games? I mean, how many one-score games can you lose, right? How many one-score games can you lose before you start to say, maybe my process needs to change, right? In terms of that aspect of it. And so I don't know. I don't know if Lance Leipold is capable of having that sort of reflection. This is virtually the same conversation that we had after the Missouri game when Kansas had a 4th down, late in the game. And, Jalen Daniels was playing well that game. They could have gone for it to give themselves an additional chance. Lance opts to punt. Kansas gives up a long run that ends up icing the game, right? Like that, we're having essentially the same conversation. This one is more egregious considering the circumstances.
Because you're not talking about a 4th and 8 in your own period, in your own, territory. Yes. I hated that decision at the time. I said it on the show. Like, I didn't like that decision at the time. But at the same time, like, I can see you saying, well, you're putting everything on that one play the negative way because if you don't get it, it's game over. But in this case, you were far enough in their territory that even if you don't get it, I mean, you would have had the ball where the missed field goal was. So
people are pointing out in the chat that, they think that, even Kyle acknowledges he's not capable. He's too damn stubborn. He's not. I understand that, and to a certain extent, I actually agree with you. And that kind of loops back into the conversation of, if he's not going to change, how much longer can you endure that if you're Travis Goff? How much longer can you accept that if you are this KU football program? In terms of, if he's not going to change that process and you're going to continue to lose games in this fashion, at what point is it sort of the straw that breaks the camel's back, so to speak, and you say, you know what? Okay, thank you for what you've done for this football program. Thank you for what you've done in terms of bringing KU back from the brink. We had a commenter earlier who said he's been watching since Glenn Mason, and it can be so much worse. We know it can be so much worse. Some of us have experienced it. That worse aspect of it. So, but again, it comes down to, okay, are you going to be satisfied with being a competitive program that maybe, okay, wins 5 to 6, 7 games a year? Or do you need to go out and find somebody that can give you a higher ceiling? And I think that kind of goes back to what you were talking about with the conference realignment stuff, Kevin. In this era of college football, just simply being like an average to above average program, it's not worth as much now as maybe it was a decade ago or longer, right? Going 8-4 every year doesn't even really matter in today's era of college football, right? Like you need to be basically competing for a championship in your conference if you want to be taken seriously as a football program going forward. And I don't know that I can confidently say that Kansas is at that level right now because of what we've seen over the past basically 2 years now.
Here's my thing. You said, I believe in the same sentence, you said self-reflection, and then you went for a little while and you mentioned Travis Goff. And we've talked about Lance's self-reflection, but at what point does self-reflection become Goff encouraging Lance to reflect? Like, I think we're all sitting here saying basically, hey, Lance needs to change this part. Like that's, I don't think anybody here is disagreeing with this part. I think where we're saying, well, Lance isn't going to get to this point on his own. I think you mentioned the other part of this, Nick, which is, hey, if your boss comes into your office and is like, hey, that's not good enough, you can't keep doing this, then I think you can take the self off of self-reflection and you can just create reflection. And so I'll be interested to see what happens there. I think Kyle makes the good point there, and that I think that Goff, kind of had a hand in what we're talking about with basketball in terms of, hey, you're going to need to make some changes. And I think that as much as we're putting it right now on, Lance should recognize this is wrong, this should be self-reflection that he should get there, I think it's actually a thing where it might not be Lance thinking, hey, I need to change this. It might be somebody coming towards him and saying, hey, we're paying you this amount of money, this part needs to change.
Yeah, it's you're right. That is an interesting conversation that, obviously we are not privy to whether or not it has been had. It might be had, we'll have, we're just kind of speculating, I think, on that front from where we are, right, in terms of maybe what might happen internally with that discussion. But yeah, I mean, how can you not, again, recognize that? Like I said, you are looking at a season where you're 5-5, and again, in almost every loss you had, if you could just reverse one coaching decision, it might significantly increase your chances of winning several of those games. And so when that becomes sort of the bottom line, game in, game out, as to maybe why you're not crossing the line, why you're not, getting it over the hump, because this kind of goes beyond, I think, the conversation of like, well, one score games are 50-50, right? Whatever. Like this goes beyond that, right? Like you are actively limiting your possibility of winning games in these scenarios.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, and that I think it's one thing to say, oh, you had a fluky bounce that went this way or the other way. It's another thing when you make decisions that actively hurt your chances to do it. And it really stinks in this case, Nick, because we talked about it earlier. The players played well enough to win. They had a good game plan, I think, overall. I think they executed well. Defense was called aggressively, and they got after Fafita. They did not sit back and let Fafita just pick them apart. And they put themselves in position to win. And I think that's the tough thing about this game, and why we're all sitting here and talking about this is it wasn't something like BYU losing because Jalen punted the ball off of their player. It wasn't even like the UNLV game, although the UNLV game was one where a lot of people blame them for going for it before the end of half. But like, it wasn't like the UNLV game where you don't scoop up a fumble that, 10 different players it feels like one of those games where you had an active decision and a chance to help your team win, and you made the wrong decision.
All right, just to kind of put a bow on this conversation, the bottom line is this: Lance Leipold is going to be the coach the rest of the season. Probably he will be the coach next season, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think you have to kind of ride with him, like some people have pointed out, and see kind of where he goes from here, because you are in a bit of a fragile state with the program in terms of the new stadium. People have talked about this being sort of a coaching carousel, that there's not a lot of sort of names that seem like they're surefire things. So I think it'll just come down to, as you said, what's the conversation like with Goff and Leipold about the situation, and if Kansas finds a way to win against Iowa State and maybe win against Utah, and the season ends up being 7-5, and then you end up winning a bowl game or getting to a bowl game, then maybe that kind of rights the ship a little bit. But it's hard to envision that in the immediate aftermath of tonight's game against Arizona. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just wish casting at this point. Maybe I'm just wish casting. All right. We promised, Kevin, at the beginning of the show, we promised that we would get to some positives about tonight's game. So let's take our final break, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit more about some of the things that went right for KU in tonight's game against Arizona. That's coming up next.
Hey, NFL fans, what's your favorite touchdown? For me, it's the next one. And that's because with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, every touchdown could bring you closer to cashing in. First touchdown scores to anytime touchdown props or the thrill of live in-game betting, every snap is loaded with opportunity. And here is the best part. New customers bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets instantly. So your team hitting pay dirt pays out to you. You download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, use code KCSN. That's code KCSN for new customers to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. Pass-through of per wager tax may apply in Illinois. Must be 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. The bet must win to receive bonus bets which expire in 7 days. Minimum odds required. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, visit dkng.co/audio. Limited time offer.
This is the Paid Podcast, a live edition of the show on a Saturday night after a pretty bad loss for KU against Arizona. The Jayhawks are now 5-5. They lose 24-20 against the Arizona Wildcats. But as promised, we said we would talk about some positives at the beginning of the show. So that reminds me, by the way, if you haven't already, please go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and also share a comment. We love to hear from all you great KU fans that are joining us here tonight. And by the way, also, I want to give a quick shout out. We're just a few minutes away. Maybe something that might cheer you up tonight. The KU women's soccer team is taking on BYU in the Big 12 tournament title game. They're going to be kicking off. Yeah, they're going to be kicking off in like 5 minutes. So as soon as we finish the show here, I'm going to be tuning in for that to maybe hopefully cheer myself up a little bit and watch the Lady Hawks take on BYU in the Big 12 tournament title. So I would encourage a lot of people to check that out as well on ESPN Plus. Big game for KU on the women's soccer side. So look, maybe if KU can't win in American football, maybe they can win in the real football in soccer.
The soccer team is certainly aggressive, Nick.
Yes. Nate Lee, if you've watched any KU soccer and you know Nate Lee, they play a very aggressive style. So maybe that might raise your spirits a little bit. That's what I'm going to be doing after we finish up the show here. Speaking of aggressiveness, you mentioned it before the break, Kevin. The KU defense played much differently today than I think we've seen them play over the course of a conference play. They were aggressive. They were blitzing a lot. They were mixing up some things. It seemed like they had a pretty strong game plan to slow down this Arizona offense, and they did do a pretty good job of that. I think heading into the game, if you would have told me that KU only allows 24 points, I would say Kansas probably wins the game. Yep. That didn't happen, but that still doesn't take away from the fact that this defense had a strong performance. They ended up sacking Noah Fifita, I think, 5 times total for the game? Yeah, 5 sacks officially for Kansas. I know Fifita. That's the most sacks, by the way, that Arizona has given up in a game this season for KU, or for Arizona, I should say, and what KU did. And it was Jalen Todd blitzing. He had a couple sacks. Leroy Harris was aggressive in making some plays. Dean Miller had a couple nice plays. So overall, what was your takeaway from sort of what the defense did in this game against Arizona?
Yeah, I love the I love the way they called it. I love the blitz packages that they did. When you have Jalen Todd coming off the edge, early on in the game. One of the things that we had talked about too, Nick, was, and I had asked DK about it, the defensive ends hadn't done much from a pass rush standpoint. I think in Big 12 games, they had 2.5 sacks heading into this one. They had only had 1 sack since the West Virginia game. And, you wind up showing a lot of different pressure packages. Dak Brinkley gets, 1.5 sacks. I really thought that DK did a nice job. And that's the thing, Nick, they still have a lot of young guys on defense. They're still going to get gashed at times. Arizona averaged 8.8 yards per carry on non-sack carries. So obviously they weren't perfect, but at the same time, it was so much better than sitting back and still getting gashed. And I think that was the good thing to see. Start signing Leroy Harris. Like I said earlier in this episode, Leroy Harris, Dak Brinkley having the game that he did, Blake Harrell coming back next year, Marcus Calvin's had some good games lately. It's starting to shape up like they could have a really fun defensive line next year if they're able to hold on to kind of all these guys who have eligibility left.
Yeah, and that really, I think, becomes the key down the stretch of the season, Kevin, is to make sure that you can maintain all these guys that you have, right, with how the season ends up. And yeah, the defense was really good today. Again, 24 points. I think if you would have given me that, 4 hours ago, I would have said deal, right? Like,
yes, 100%.
Yeah, like I would have trusted the offense to get it done in that scenario. And yeah, I really liked some of the different stuff that you outlined in terms of what they were doing with the different blitz packages and getting aggressive. And that's something that was really, really fun to see. And in this game, actually, funnily enough, I will say this: people, I think, were somewhat hyper focusing, and DK McDonald was asked about it this week about the DNs not always rushing the passer and dropping a little bit more. Funnily enough, in this game, Kevin, we saw Leroy Harris get an interception in pass coverage.
Yeah.
And then we saw Dean Miller make a couple nice plays. But then at the same time, we still saw them blitzing and making plays as well.
Yeah.
Leroy Harris off the edge was really good, I thought, several times in harassing Noah Fafita. So, yeah, the defense did what it needed to do, right? And that's what I think what maybe adds to the frustration of this loss is it feels like now the games that you've lost for KU, there's been games where the defense has stepped up and the offense hasn't been able to put it away, or the offense has played its part and the defense couldn't get a stop. You think back like the Cincinnati game, in which, if the defense could get one stop, maybe you win that game. Obviously, the Missouri game as well. So it's annoying that it doesn't feel like KU has. Well, let me ask you this, Kevin. I mean, has KU played, in your eyes, a complete 4-quarter game?
No. I mean, I didn't even have to let you finish your question because the answer is no. And it's part of the reason I think I'm still watching this team with 2 games left is we haven't seen what this team is capable of yet. And I know that sounds crazy coming out of game 10, but there hasn't been a single game where they have hit right on all 3 things, running the ball, passing the ball, special teams, and defense. I mean, maybe West Virginia-ish, but at the same time, I don't think that they've peaked. And so you're waiting to see, and Leipold's teams have traditionally gotten better over the course of the year. Certainly last year that was the case. And so I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, man, not that this was a perfect game, but this was a game where Kansas showed a lot more defensively than they had. And so you're running out of chances to show what you're capable of. But no, I don't think that they have put it all together for a full 4 quarters yet. Yeah,
and that's what makes it frustrating, right, as well. And Nick Ayers points out, that some of that has to come back to coaching at the end of the day, right? If you're not able to put together, 4 quarters for your team over the course of the season, because you're right, we're 10 games into the year and you're still asking those questions. People are mentioning about the offensive line. What was your take on how things looked offensively on the offensive line for Kansas? Felt like Jalen Daniels was protected pretty well in this game.
Yeah, I thought they did a good job. I thought Jalen did a good job of, not kind of running into pressure too. When he extended the play, he did a really nice job of extending it. But the offensive line has been better, and I think they're taking that step forward. It's just taken them a little bit of time to get there. I think the interior offensive line is playing better. And I honestly think that when you look at Calvin Clements as a guy that within the program before the season started, Nick, you can attest to this. I mean, guys were saying, hey, this guy's going to be off to the NFL at some point. He's had a really rough season. When you look at where he was a week ago against Oklahoma State, he was objectively terrific. And that was against a defensive line that had actually been playing pretty well and against a run defense that had been playing pretty well. And I thought, I need to go back and watch the full tape, but I thought Calvin looked pretty good again tonight. And so when you look at the offensive line, I do think that they're playing quite a bit better. And I think if you want to have a reason for, hey, why are they maybe going to beat Iowa State? Why are they maybe going to hang around with Utah? I think the offensive line is playing better and playing with a lot more physicality as well.
Yeah, and KU did lean into the run game tonight, kind of like we talked about in our preview show. You end up with Daniel Highshaw getting 18 carries. LeSean Williams was kind of limited, for whatever reason tonight. But then Jalen Daniels, as you mentioned earlier in the show, he ended up being a leading rusher with 74 yards. And a lot of that was on quarterback draw plays. There was a lot of design quarterback draw, quarterback run looks for him, which I don't hate that. We actually had somebody reply to us on Twitter about that where, I think you had mentioned it, Kevin, previously that Jalen, honestly, sometimes as a runner is a bit better when he's able to improvise, right? Less specifically designed run plays for him versus, able to get him outside of the pocket or get him moving and allow him to sort of use his creativity. But what do you think of what he did today?
Yeah, I thought the one QB draw on third and long.
There was one that worked.
There was one that worked, and
there was one that didn't.
There was one that didn't, and the one that didn't, I was kind of like, man, that was really conservative, especially since I felt like KU's receivers were winning at that point in time, and so I would have liked to try and throw the ball there. Cam Pickett had some good plays in this one. Emmanuel Henderson did as well. Levi Wentz had a couple plays, also dropped one or two, wasn't able to quite come back to the ball that was nearly picked off on the final drive. But overall, that was a situation where I wanted to see him throw it. The one that worked was kind of funny because it is really one of those things, right? You look at the K-State game a year ago, and Jeff Grimes runs the ball on third and long twice, and it went for touchdowns both times. And so you're like, oh, brilliant play call. When at the same time, if you run on third and long and it gets stuffed, you're like, well, what the crap was that call? Like that makes no sense. And so I did feel a little bit bad after the second one, did work. But no, I liked that part of it. There was an option at one point. Nick, you know me, I'd love it if the whole offense was option. I'm a big option guy. And even beyond that, I think Jalen Daniels is really good at running option. And so I did think there was some variance in the running game. I will say, though, Nick, we talked about the fact that, hey, 4th and 2, why don't you go out there with Zeke and give him a shot on that? I agree with that. But also, I wouldn't mind Zeke getting 4 carries or 5 carries rather than 1. Right now he's getting sort of that 1 carry per game. And I know he did kind of get the pass play on this one where they put him out there, but I wouldn't mind. I would not mind Zeke getting a few more chances to tote the ball just because he does give your running game that element of explosion to it.
Yeah, the one pass play that he had, there was a holding penalty.
Yeah.
So, and it wasn't there. Whatever he ended up throwing it away anyways. But
yeah.
But yes, I find the use of Isaiah Marshall to be simultaneously exciting and interesting, and yet also puzzling, because Jim Zabrowski kind of openly said like, yeah, we have a list of plays that I want to get to with him involved. And he talked about how against in the Oklahoma State game, Kansas only had 2 drives in the first half, right? So it came down to, okay, well, we couldn't get to it, right? Like I couldn't get to it, right? But yeah, it seems a bit puzzling because if you want to run with the quarterback as much as they do, and I think it's utilizing Jalen Daniels is good, but like Zeke's your best running quarterback. So, why not to have a couple of those design quarterback draws for Jalen Daniels, go to Zeke Marshall instead and just see what happens, and see what he can do. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm curious.
It's kind of like going to a fancy restaurant and like the portion size comes out and the food is like delicious, but like there's barely any on the plate, and you leave and you're like, I guess I'm going to go grab some fast food because I'm still hungry. And that's how I feel. That's how I feel about Zeke Marshall runs it in the offense right now. Like, obviously the food is really good. Would like it if there was more of it.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'd love to see. I would love to just have the opportunity to give some truth serum to Jim Zebrowski and be like, hey, how many Isaiah Marshall plays do you have, and how many are you like? Are you trying to do you have like a number in mind? What are you trying to call? Like, what are you trying to do? But yeah, it's interesting. So, and again, I think Jalen Daniels is up and down today. That's a funny joke from Gary. Ready for the Marshall Plan. As a history buff, yes. I love that, Gary. Thank you. If you don't know what the Marshall Plan is, first of all, go to Wikipedia and Google it because it's a history thing. But shout out to Gary. Love that.
You just hit the chat with a Google it. That's not very nice after a loss,
dude. I'm just listen. I'm just trying to say, if you don't know what it is, educate yourself a little bit because as an extreme history buff, I like the reference. There is what I'm trying to get at. But yeah, Jalen Daniels, that was up and down today. He finished 15 to 29, 199 yards, the 1 touchdown. Made some nice throws, but also I think, again, continued to look like he was pressing. And you have to wonder, as that kind of leads me into this question from Kyle Coffey about, which game had the best chance to win in the final 2. I think you have to wonder if Jalen Daniels, looking at these last 2 games, if he continues to press on himself, right? If he continues to try to do too much, and how that affects Kansas. I'm pretty confident I know which game you think Kansas has a better chance to win. So you think it's Iowa State, right?
Yeah. I thought KU had a better chance to win Iowa State than they would have to win this one. It just happened that they played pretty well defensively and put themselves in a position to win this one. And I thought Jalen was fine to good in this one. I mean, you look at it, he had 2 or 3 drops. You also had the Keaton Kubeka route, which again, without the benefit of replay, but going by what people have said who were either there or on the radio broadcast, apparently he thought Keaton Kubeka was going to sit down if he does that. If the guys catch the couple drops that we're talking about, then you're looking at him completing, 65% of his passes and having over 300 yards of total offense and all of those things. And so those were things that weren't necessarily on him. Obviously, nearly a devastating fumble at the end. And you hate to see that because it is one of those things that just keeps happening when you're in those situations where it's don't put the ball at risk. You wrap it up the best way that possible to where the ball isn't going on the ground. I understand he's trying to make a play, but you can't put yourself in a position to lose games because you're losing turnovers. Didn't ultimately wind up hurting KU there, but that was sort of the one thing that I thought, oh man, that was not a good play by Jalen.
Well, what's crazy, Kevin, funnily enough, is there was officially no turnovers by either team, yes. Right? Like this was the most turnover-heavy, turnover-free game of all time, as it turned out. Officially, neither team ended up having turnover.
It wasn't turnover free, but remember the Nevada game in 2003 where Nevada had 6 or 7 fumbles and KU recovered either none or one of them. It felt a little bit like that, where it's like, come on, man, it's finish that playoff. Of course, Leroy Harris did catch the pass and did take it all the way back, but unfortunately called back because of that hold.
Yeah, I would have to assume, going back to Kyle's question about these last 2 games, I have to assume it's Iowa State, right? You're going to be coming off of a bye. Now, Iowa State will have a bye as well.
Yep.
So maybe that helps them get a little bit more healthy heading into that game. But that feels like your best chance to win. I think looking at the Utah game, it's a combination for me of Utah being as physical as they are. It's concerning that they might just overwhelm you. But then I am also concerned about the fact that, especially if you lose against Iowa State, again, that's an 11 a.m. Black Friday game. There's not going to be any students. There's probably not going to be much of an atmosphere for that game, which is really sad. Like, I wish that wasn't the case because, it'll be the last game for guys like Daniel Highshaw and Jalen Daniels and players like that. So I wish that wasn't the case, but I fear that will be the case if KU does not win against Iowa State. And so that all being said, it's concerning, that Utah game. So I definitely look at the Iowa State game off of the bye. I understand it's on the road, but you've owned Iowa State generally, and we'll have plenty of time to dive deeper into that game, going forward. Scary. It was the way the schedule worked out. Yeah. So KU had the bye before K-State. K-State also had a bye. And how it worked out is Iowa State's also going to be on bye next week, leading into this game against KU as well. So kind of funny, I guess, how the schedule worked out that way. But yeah, I have to assume I'm with you, Kevin, on the fact that the Iowa State game certainly seems more winnable than the Utah game. And the Utah game feels even less winnable if you don't win against Iowa State, if that makes sense, right? Like it's
Sure.
sort of a thing where it's like, I'm thinking about it in my head, like, okay, Iowa State game looks more winnable. And if you don't win it, then the Utah game looks even less winnable than if you are able to win against Iowa State.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. We have a comment in there, time to play Marshall. I've said this before. The best thing that you can do for Zeke Marshall is to have Jalen Daniels get you to a bowl game, because those added practices are going to be worth so much in terms of the reps that they're able to get him and all of those things. And so the worst thing that you want to do, especially with a roster that's going to have a lot of young guys coming back, is to go to a new quarterback and wind up missing out on a bowl game. That would be pretty catastrophic there.
Kevin, we've gone for over an hour here. You got any final thoughts here before we wrap up the show?
That was, I'm not saying that was the most frustrating loss, but I'm going to say that it was certainly in that discussion that Kansas has had under Lance Leipold. And it was a game that you and I heading in thought Arizona would win. Quite frankly, we both predicted Arizona to win. And you're in a spot that I think if anybody would have said to you beforehand, hey, you've got a 4th and 2, you've got the lead, you get it, you can win the game, anybody would have taken that arrangement in a heartbeat. And you find yourself in that situation and wind up losing. And I think that's where a lot of the angst comes from with a lot of the people in the chat. That's where it comes from with us. And so Lance Leipold has done one thing really, really well. I'm not saying it's the only thing, but he has done one thing really, really well, I think, in his time at Kansas, and that's they do come back and play after having just heartbreaking losses. They do find a way to just sort of recharge the engines and go right back out there. And I do think that that's a testament to the culture that they built. But at the same time, I know fans are not looking forward to having the bye week to have to kind of sit with this one before Kansas comes back against Iowa State.
Nick asks in the chat, will Swain drop an F-bomb in his recap as well?
I don't believe so.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so.
You only get that here.
Yeah. I mean, Nick hit it in like the first 3 seconds. Like he came right out the gate like blazing. That was a shot play, as we'll call it. Nick came right out of the gate and went for 6. So
yeah, and I mean, just thinking back, it's so funny because when you make a statement like this has to be the most frustrating loss under Lance Leipold, just without even thinking about it, I already envisioned 4 other games just with the snap of a finger that I can automatically think of that well, I don't know, that one was pretty frustrating too. Even this season, there's been 2 or 3 games like that. So it's I don't know if that's I think
the most frustrating was probably K-State a year ago, if we're being honest about it, just because you're in that situation. K-State averages 2.2 yards per play in the 4th quarter and somehow takes the lead and wins in the 4th quarter. That's the one that I think really stands out to me, because it would have been, a streak break. It would have been all of the different things. And and instead you're in a position to win and you don't get across the finish line there.
Nick says, appreciate you all providing the catharsis. You know what? If that's what we're here for, I'll take it.
Yep.
That's going to do it for this edition of the show here tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to be talking more KU basketball, unfortunately, because they lost against North Carolina. We'll talk more about that. We're going to be talking plenty more. And again, KU women's soccer is in action right now against BYU in the Big 12 championship game of the tournament. I would highly encourage you to tune in for that. That's what I'm about to do right now, and you should too. You know what? Rock chuck, everybody. I'm still going to end the night on a positive note, and we'll talk to you again soon. See ya.